This is a biblical analysis of sin. Hello, my name is Elliot Reinhardt. Today I am telling you about my capstone project. Over the last semester, I have been learning about sin. This last semester, I have set out to prove that the biblical idea of sin is the opposite of righteousness. I have examined how people in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, as well as people in the 1st century AD onto the present time, have understood sin. The aim of the Christian life is righteousness. Sin is the opposite of righteousness. One word used in the New Testament for righteousness is dikaiosune, meaning righteousness or justice. The usage of this word, according to Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, means a righteousness of which God is the source or author, but practically a divine righteousness. If someone is righteous, that person must be called righteous by another person. For someone to be truly righteous, God must be the one who says they are righteous. If someone is unrighteous, someone must say that person is unrighteous. The only person qualified to say if someone is truly righteous or truly unrighteous is God, because he is the only truly righteous being. Unrighteousness basically means to not possess righteousness. A righteous person does not sin. Unrighteousness, put in positive terms, is sin. In order to understand sin, we must define what it is. Most languages have their own words for sin. This can make it hard to define what sin is, unless we have a common source for our understanding. Sin is best understood through the Bible, since it is that common source. The Bible was written over the course of thousands of years and in many languages. As such, over time, the meaning of the words changed, culture changed, and more words were used or stopped being used to describe sin. The only thing about the 15 or more different words used for sin in the Bible that are similar is the fact that someone must make the claim. Someone must say if something is or is not sin. Unless God is the one saying that something is sin, there is usually some question as to whether it actually is a sin. This is because God is the only truly qualified person to make this claim. There are many different types of sin and ways of thinking about it. Throughout the Bible and Christian history, sin has been mentioned in different ways, such as generational sins, sins of action, thought, beliefs, and the 7 deadly sins. Most sins fit into one of 3 categories, either as my sin, a sin that is within me, their sin, a sin that is originating in someone else, or a societal sin, a sin that is around us. These categories can be helpful in understanding sin because they clarify our relationship to the sin. When it comes to understanding sin, Genesis is probably one of the best places to start. Genesis contains the fall of man and humanity's first sin. As such, Genesis offers a good understanding of how sin was originally understood. Let's look at 2 different stories in Genesis and see what they have in common. In the first story, Joseph is resisting Potiphar's wife. Joseph says, "No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Genesis 39:9. This says sin is against God. Now let's look at another part of the story. Reuben and his brothers were talking about their imprisonment in Egypt. Reuben said, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood." Genesis 42:22. Reuben saw their imprisonment in Egypt as a punishment for their sin against Joseph, and their current situation as their judgment. What do these 2 stories have in common? Well, they have the same word for sin, which is chada, meaning to miss, go wrong. Besides this, in both of these cases, the sin is committed against someone. That's the point here. Sin has to do with relationships. Sin and righteousness are often contrasted in the Bible. Consider the example of Cain and Abel. They were brothers and the sons of Adam and Eve. They both made offerings to God, but God liked Abel's offering and not Cain's. This made Cain angry. The issue at hand is that Cain did not accept God's judgment. Cain judged his offering and found it good, but God did not. In Genesis 4:7, God says to Cain, "If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at the door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." Cain was making himself unrighteous before God. That is, a sinner. In the next verse, we find out that Cain killed Abel. This again is an act of Cain judging that what is not his to judge. Again, we find God judging Cain for his bad judgment. Consider another example of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, while all the earth was sinful. God decided to get rid of all the evil people in the world through the flood. This is a natural extension of the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve were removed from the garden because of their sin. Humanity would be removed from earth because of their sin. Why is it that Noah was not also considered sinful? Well, Genesis 6:9 says, "Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God." You can see how righteousness is contrasted by sin. Again, when it comes to understanding what sin is, temptation is an important subject to understand the nuances of sin. Sin is contrasted by righteousness. But what is temptation, lust, inclinations, and desires? Jesus said in Matthew 5:27 through 28, "You have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you, whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart." This is an example of a temptation that is fulfilled by the act of lusting. What is strange to me is that Jesus was tempted. Matthew 4:1 says, "Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil." So Jesus was tempted, and he indulged the devil by letting the devil lead him. How is this not sin? It's not sin because Jesus judged rightly against the devil and what he said. Since Jesus is God, he has the authority to disagree with the devil and to make righteous judgments about the things he encountered. A proper understanding of sin should allow a Christian to understand why they need God. Romans 3 says, "But now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testify. This righteousness is given through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. There is no difference between Jew and Gentile, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and all are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that came by Jesus Christ." Once we realize that we are sinners, we can come to accept the grace of God. A proper understanding of sin leads us to Christ. It leads us to glorifying God for all that he has given us. Thank you for listening to my capstone. I will be in the Zoom meeting today following this YouTube video in order to answer any of your questions about my capstone project. Thank you for listening to me today.